UKMotorTalk.
Well, hello everyone. We are, as always, back. And today, we're not alone. I've got that feeling that somebody is watching me. Anyway, I am Mike. Hello.
I am Jim. Hello.
I'm Graham. Hello to you all.
I'm Dave, I think. And we also have...
Kyle. Hello, how are we doing?
Hello, Carl. How are you?
Hello, Kyle.
Oh, I'm good.
Not too shabby.
We should point out at this point that Carl is burdened with the task of looking after our producer and editor, Andrew's Vauxhall, and all of its wonder and might. He's looking at me, he's saying things, he's on mute, and no, we can't hear him.
I can't believe this. That must mean we have the fourth richest man in Britain on the podcast
That's
this
right.
evening then. That's not too bad, is it?
There we
Almost
go.
Patient.
Patience of a saint.
And do you enjoy maintaining Trigger's brew?
Well, he's a paying customer, so I can't complain.
Fantastic.
Good answer.
Definitely we're going to come back to that in a bit. In the meantime, however, there has been some news. There was a story that, to my mind, was so ridiculous, and being, as you know, perhaps not the most knowledgeable about F1, when I was sat in a car earlier on today with Jim, I suggested to him this story, and he looked at me like I was a complete and utter maniac.
Same as usual, you mean?
To be fair, it's quite a maniacal story, isn't it? And it was just the fact it just didn't make any sense. In the story was Alpine were considering ditching Renault engines. I was like, no, that can't be the case. That's like Ferrari saying we're going to stop using Ferrari engines, or the Mercedes F1 team ditching Mercedes engines, because Renault, Alpine, Renault, they're the same company, they're the same brand. So
You did explain this
why
at
on earth
length
would
to
they
me in the
consider-
car.
Yeah, so it was like, but no, surely that can't be the case. But having done a bit of reading since I got home, which is some actual, I suppose it counts as research for this podcast. Apparently, they are considering it. I mean, I say they are Alpine. I think it shows that Team Enstone, which was what was it before it was Alpine? It was Renault, actually Renault. And in its previous guises, it's been Benetton, it's been Tolman, it's been all sorts of different teams, but Team Enstone, I suggest we call it, because that's where it's based and that's where it's always been based. But yeah, Bruno Famin has said he might ditch Renault engines, but it's actually not quite as insane as it sounds. I mean, it is slightly insane depending on who's managing the purse strings, but Renault powertrains and Renault engines are made in France, so actually it's Team Enstone in, motorsport Silicon Valley in the UK deciding not to buy their engines from a bunch of people in France, and I think we've had our own conversations about the French today as well, so I think we better not stray into that. But it's actually not as daft as it sounds, but maybe just a cost-saving exercise, but I think it doesn't look particularly good from a non-F1 fan's viewpoint, does it, that a works team is ditching its works engine?
One wonders, though, if there was another rumour floating a few days ago that Renault were considering levering Alpine's boss out because they didn't think he was performing adequately. And that sort of scuttlebutt was running around the paddock. So whether this is a touch of bitterness flowing in the other direction, who knows? But I mean, the fact is they've not been performing to the standard that one would expect.
The Alpine engine didn't do itself any favours at Le Mans at the weekend, did it? I think it packed up about 6 hours into the race, something like that. So didn't do as well as the Ferrari or the Toyota or the Porsche or the Peugeot or the Lexus or the Toyota or just anyone else. Basically, they didn't do very well there. So yeah, maybe there is a bit of truth in it. So we shall see. So who do you have powering your Alpine, Ferrari, Alpine, Mercedes, Renault, Mercedes? Probably Mercedes, isn't it? Because Renault and Mercedes have a link up already on the road car division, so kind of makes sense, I suppose, doesn't it?
To a point, it does seem a bit bizarre. I would say that the optics of that are not good. if you that would be probably my departing thought on that one, really. But anyway, moving on to other news. There has been other news, in fact. Dave, you spotted something in the car park.
Well, yeah, no, this was a couple of months ago, and I doubt I'm going to be seeing any more anytime soon. It was the Fisker Ocean, which, for those of you who aren't quite as obsessed with cars as the rest of us, it's the startup's Fisker, the company. Their startup car was an SUV, an electric SUV.
Surprise.
If the name's familiar, Henrik Fisker is a man who's made some very nice, pretty things for Aston Martin in the past, and also has a history of setting up his own company to set up and make and sell his own cars. Well, unfortunately, that company went bust. That was the Fisker Karma. That didn't sell very well and collapsed. And now, unfortunately, the company that he's also set up in the wake of the Fisker Karma unpleasantness has also gone to the wall. It's Chapter 11 bankruptcy for the company, which is a bit of a shame, really, because I was quite keen. I mean, I'm not a big SUV fan, but as SUVs go, this one looked quite cool and it had some interesting little quirky things. And I know I'm not alone in liking quirks and features, as Doug DeMuro has patented that. But he was all over the thing like a rash because it was full of pretty little gewgaws and bits and pieces. But unfortunately, the one that I saw in the car park down the road is likely to be the only one I'm likely to see, certainly for a while, until they work out who's likely to buy the remnants, because Fisker's gone bust, and they were trying to do what they called a light model, where they had other people making all the bits and pieces for them, including the car. It was contracted out to Magnus Steyr, who are a company in Austria who build cars for people on contract. They've made some quite well-known cars over the years. Every four-wheel drive Mercedes 4MATIC for a while was made in that factory, little known to most people. And that's where they were making the Ocean. But unfortunately, because it's all gone it's up, there's 500 people being made redundant or certainly put on layoff for the time being in Austria.
That's bad news.
Yeah, it is bad
It is
news.
bad
And it's a shame. I mean, us car people don't get to see interesting things on the road. And it is interesting. Any new car that's on the road is interesting. This one, perhaps a bit more so, because it had a few little bits and pieces that were different. The talk is that apparently they're likely to be taken over. The bits and pieces will be bought by perhaps Nissan, who were in talks with them before it all collapsed. So they may hoover it all up and just rebadge the thing as a Nissan, or perhaps a Renault, or an Alpine, who knows. But
Nissan engines in Alpine. Nissan to F1 confirmed.
With electric motors. They're slightly getting ahead of themselves there, aren't they? But let's watch this space. I don't think all that investment is just going to go waste. I hope that somebody will pick it up and they'll be back on the road soon. Maybe not with a Fisker badge on the front, though.
I think the Fisker Karma was a bit ahead of its time, to be honest. It looked, it was quite a good-looking car, to my eyes anyway. There's almost bits of Z8 and all kinds of different classically well-styled cars that made up the shape of it, and weird funky steering wheel aside, I thought it was quite cool. And I seem to remember it was largely sustainable in terms of the materials that were covering the interior. There was lots to like about it, and as you say, it was genuinely interesting. So it is a shame.
I know somebody used to work for Fisker in the Fisker Karma as was, and I think shortly before the money ran out there, they were advised that this is probably the last time we're going to be able to pay you. So it's up to you if you come back from your lunch break or not. And they didn't, as it happens, and they didn't pay them anymore, and that was it. So but it's always a shame when these things go pop, because always you think there's a lot of this is born out of passion and enthusiasm, and it's as many British car manufacturers were born out of a single person's vision, and many British car manufacturers have gone by the wayside. There was always a group of people working away and pouring their heart and soul into these things, and it's always sad when the financial pressures, economic pressures, development quest for green technology, this, that, the other, just makes the figures simply astronomical. But then if you've got huge, well-established manufacturers sharing platforms and underpinnings and have been doing it for years with ICE cars as well as with electric cars, if it's a struggle for VW to write off the cost of developing a new platform across all of their brands, and like I said, Mercedes and Renault sharing underpinnings, it shows how monumentally difficult the task of designing and building a car is, isn't it? It's absolutely nuts.
I mean, historically, if you look back through the car industry, the failure rate is incredibly high, particularly has been, I think, in the last 20, 30 years. You've got to get very quickly to a sort of optimum point where there's enough money coming in through the door to pay the wages, pay the future development costs, etc., etc. It's very, very hard to reach that.
Plus, I think we're in a tricky situation at the moment where, particularly for electric SUVs, and hence me saying surprised, the market is currently saturated. Every manufacturer and their mum is currently making an electric SUV, thinking that's going to be the most popular thing. And I'm not entirely sure that it is, but nevertheless, it seems to be everyone that's doing it. And there's a constant drive for all kinds of efficiency, style, handling, how well your phone goes into it, whatever, little bits of flair. Cost-driven vehicles in terms of people are just not accepting the fact that to go electric means that you have to spend twice as much as an ICE vehicle. And then on the flip side of that, if you then are a manufacturer that is looking at ICE vehicles, unless you're very niche, so catering or someone potentially, and you're selling small volume, then you really need to make sure that you're underneath 120 grams of CO2, and then there's all the other bits and pieces that go on top of it, all the technology that means you now need to have a speed limiter that's on when you start a vehicle, or the fact that you need to have anti-collision braking or whatever it might be, bliss systems in order to get a better Euro NCAP rating. There's so many things, which means that you are caught up in legislative red tape, as we have been today, with different things. But yeah, it is tricky. And so I suppose it's probably no small wonder that a new manufacturer, unless they are coming to the market with something that's so entirely unique or so expensive to buy that it's niche, there's a waiting list for whatever it might be, like Pininfarina, for example, aren't going to be chucking out the equivalent of a Ford Fiesta, are they? Their cars are millions. These are the people that have super yachts that buy these things. It's you look at Rolls-Royce and then maybe you go a peg above, that kind of thing. So it's a different thing. I can understand how, if you've got an established name and the right people in the game, and you can deliver that level of quality luxury and you've got a market for it, that you would then succeed. But to enter an already saturated market is quite tricky. And I think it'll even be tricky for the likes of Lotus with the Electra, a stunning looking car, very Urus looking. But I did have a sneaky look at a lease for that earlier on today because I was interested. Something popped through on an email. It was something like £4,800 down, under £500 a month for one of those, which is probably within the realms of businesses looking at having those as company cars and things, I would think, for that type of vehicle. If someone wants something that's particularly flash, if you're a company director sitting there now stroking your chin thinking, yeah, okay, I could probably make that work. Yeah, it's tricky. It is tricky. And so, although it's very sad, it probably doesn't come as a massive surprise to a lot of us. What did come as a massive surprise, though, was some good news. I'm going to say this, and Graham, you must be very happy about this because you're the kind of man that appreciates a long roof.
Volvo man.
Volvo man. I'd probably count myself as a Volvo man as well, but the V60 and the V90 are coming back, which I think is a great choice. Carl's nodding here. Would you agree with this?
You can't go wrong with a Volvo.
You can't. Good. I'm so pleased to hear you say that, to be honest.
Just for a bit of background, as we briefly introduced Kyle as a mechanic, surely a Volvo's got to be one of the cars that brings in very, very little work for you. I mean, 'cause they're famed for their reliability and ruggedness. Although on the podcast, we do have a man who has managed to mechanically kill a Volvo, which is great. So somehow spectacular. But I think it was basically running it without oil, without a cam belt, and without two pistons for 100,000 miles. And eventually it needed a seal changing or something, didn't it? It was the abuse that you gave it. It was phenomenal.
I couldn't believe on the motorway how quickly an oil pump failure could destroy the engine in a matter of seconds.
Pretty quick.
And it was gone. And that was my second, and now I'm on my third Volvo. So I'm a bit of a Volvo addict, but then they're incredibly practical vehicles. And given that we're thinking of moving house the latter part of this year, so the Volvo will come into its own yet again.
I can confirm you can move house using pretty much only a Volvo. That is true.
Yeah.
It's also handy when I was selling my sister's old appliances and various white goods that I'd stored in the garage for a while for her when she moved. I just said, shall I get rid of them? She's like, yeah, check them on eBay, see what you can get for them. And this chap turned up with a Volvo estate. And out of all the goods, the deal was, well, whatever you can fit in the back of the car, he wanted to buy. and it turned out that he bought everything. So every single appliance that you can think of and fit in a kitchen. There was an oven, there was a dishwasher, a washing machine, a tumble dryer. I'm sure there was something else as well. All went in the back of this Volvo estate, and off he went. So Volvos have earned me money on eBay over the years.
I'm pretty sure that Brad, my beige 270,000 mile Volvo, moved at least 2 people, including you, I think, Jim, actually, and another friend of ours. It's amazing. It is basically the size of a van inside. So yeah, I've got a lot of time for a Volvo, I have to say, and I would happily have another. And the fact that the V60 and V90, which were I think 2016 and 2018 when those came out respectively, are back, albeit now just as hybrids, is a good thing. And fair play to Volvo for actually listening to the customer.
There's still a market for estate cars, call them whatever you like, but there's still a market for them, I think. But then I'm on my third, so I'm biased.
Well, you're in good company. The police seem to be using them all now, don't they? Because since they can't
They've
use
gone back to
BMWs. Yeah, well, since the engine unpleasantness, every other police car seems to be either a Volvo estate or a Skoda Superb estate, actually. Lots of them around here, so good company.
Yes.
Chatting to a friend who's a copper, and he was saying, yeah, they'd had a few back and forths with Volvo in trying to turn the safety systems off and bits and pieces like that. They worked out that the slight issue they had with the Volvo was that it couldn't T-pack anyone because all the collision avoidance systems were too good, and that no matter how fast you tried to drive at a fleeing scrotum, you couldn't smash into him and try and take him out. It was impossible. So sent them all back to Volvo, and they sort of fiddled around with it and said, right, it's always in dynamic mode, stop starts off, you can crash into who you like, and we've turned the power up a bit as well, so have at it. And yeah, I think they're quite happy in them these days.
When I bought my first one after a conversation with a pal in traffic, and he was saying that the Sussex police turned them in at 225,000. That was the point at which they decided they'd sell them. I was aiming for that. I haven't got to that yet, but the one I'm in now is just under 170, and I'm expecting at least another year or so out of it yet.
It's not even halfway through. 170,000 miles. Come on, don't be a lightweight about it. They'll go on forever if you keep it serviced. Just got to keep oil in the engine, Graham. That's the problem.
Well, indeed, you have to keep checking these things. It does lose a little, but then it's an elderly car. It's hardly a surprise. But I mean, we bought it low mileage, got a very good deal on it, and it's proved its weight in gold. Well, in oil.
Same thing these days, isn't it?
There's always the option if someone does pull out in front of you, of course, that you can just go straight through the middle of them and carry on going.
I was seeing years and years ago on it was a Volvo magazine. There was a family that had just climbed out of a Volvo estate, which had a tractor parked on the roof. And the tractor had fallen off a truck and landed on their roof, four-wheel drive tractor, so a big bugger. And they got out and walked away. Very impressive.
Yeah, I know a friend, his dad's Volvo. There was him, his brother, and his dad in the car at the time. And I think there was a tanker, a cylindrical tanker on the back of a flatbed. I think it weighed, I want to say 32 tons. This thing, it was on BBC 999 Lifesavers, whatever it was back in the day, and this big heavy 32-ton cylinder rolled off this flatbed and landed on top of the car. It did cause him a few issues long term because it had pressed on the steering wheel and squished into his legs and this, that, the other. But they all walked away from it, and 32 tons landed on top of the car, and they all got out. One had to be carted away in an ambulance, but is still alive and kicking and walking around to this day. So it's even going back to the early 90s, they were safe as houses, weren't they?
Definitely so. Now, we have members of the team who have been reviewing cars for years. We have members of the team who have been in the motor industry for years. We have Carl with us today. And you are currently working in the motor industry. And would you like to explain a bit about what it is that you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a mechanic of 20 years now, I think it must be. Run my own company, general servicing, maintenance, all the rest of it. But fit in a few sort of quirky jobs along the way as well, just to spice things up, so it's just not the bog standard servicing every day, and then just chuck a little bit of my own cars in there as well, just for good fun, just for glutton for punishment.
Now I'm wearing a classic mini shirt, which is well, it wasn't by mistake. It was entirely on purpose because I heard that, like me, you've got a bit of a bent for classic minis, and you've got one as well. Is that right?
I do indeed, yeah. Didn't even plan to purchase it.
Those are the best purchases.
Oh yes, yeah. I knew of a horde of minis being pulled out of an estate. I think there was somewhere in the region of about 50 cars in this collection in a barn, and there was a friend of mine looking for a mini. I knew where there was one, so I went down to have a look at it for him, and ended up coming away with one myself.
Well, there's good restraint. Only come away with one, I would say. If there's 50 there.
I
Yeah.
was going to say, did you only take one Volvo estate down to put the two classic minis in?
Yeah, well, the boot was full, so we put them in the glove box.
No, you can get 3 minis in a Volvo estate, 2 inside and 1 on the roof. It's easy.
And one on a trailer. That's 4. There you go. Easy.
I've seen them in the back of a transit before now. People loading minis into the back of
Yeah,
a...
yeah.
Yeah. So there's got to be space for it. So tell us a bit about your mini.
Yeah, so it's a 1981 little Mini 850.
Mhm.
So it's been in the barn for 20 years, but you wouldn't believe it. I really struck gold with it when I put it on the ramp to find out that it actually had floor pans and subframes still attached.
The original ones.
Blimey.
Not the original, but it's been loved in the past.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's on the road now. Yeah, a little bit of sort of fettling through the winter period. Spent a tidy penny on it, getting it sorted. But yeah, on the whole, yeah, she's been spot on. Actually took it out at the weekend, went for a little drive down to Liphook for a little breakfast car meet, and yeah, good as gold.
So is it a standard car or modified or?
Pretty much standard, in glorious brown with old English white
Nice.
roof. Yeah,
Nice.
without all the jazzy arches and the big 12-inch wheels and that. It's a flat-sided 10-inch wheel, bog standard, not even the Lux model, so it's just the single speedo, no oil pressure gauge, no temperature gauge.
Was it tawny brown? I can't remember the colour name.
I can't remember. I know it's not the russet brown. It's the lighter brown
Yeah.
than the russet brown. So it could well be.
God bless the
Yeah.
80s, 70s and 80s for these wonderful colours. It's the sort of, that era of the browns and the beiges, isn't it?
Oh,
British
yes.
Leyland with their all drab colour chart.
Yeah, but you've got to love it. There's something about it. I think you used to see quite a lot of clubbies in that sort of colour, didn't you? Sort of the flat-fronted
Yes.
clubmans.
Yeah,
So I know what you mean. So yeah, that's. I'm trying to think. What mark would that be? Mark
Mark
II,
III,
at that point?
81.
Mark 3. Yeah, nice. Yeah, that's. You got to love a mini, haven't you? Really, it's
Oh,
proper.
Everyone loves a Mini.
You've got to. I think even if you don't, you kind of secretly do. If you've got any interest in actually driving something, much like a Caterham, it's all there, isn't it? Everything that you do, every input that you put in has an action. There's no. I mean, there might be some vagary to it, but pretty much everything you put in is directly doing something, isn't it?
Given it the limited suspension travel, though, I'm not sure I fancy a 60 or early 70s Mini on the sort of potholed things that they call roads these days. They were even in their heyday. The earlier Minis were a bit jarring for my aging bones, and my aging bones weren't quite so aging then. They were a tough ride. They were a hard ride.
To be honest, the roads are so miserable. I went out at the weekend in the Onion. Now it's back on the road. I managed to do about 50 or 60 or so miles, and even just pottering around town. This is for my sins an old Ford Orion for the benefit of the tape, and it's got coilover suspension and bits of the front end are all rose jointed, so it's relatively firm. And long story short, I went down a normal residential road which had looked like it'd been bombed and practically dislocated my anus by just thundering down 2 or 3 massive, great big bumps, but didn't manage to knock the tracking out again like I did the first time I took it out, first time in ages. But it had me thinking, I do have to make this thing a bit softer. But
Is
to
that
be
because
honest,
we'd actually tightened up the nuts underneath that sort of secured everything? Was that
Yes.
anything to do with it?
Yeah, so as a professional, you'll appreciate how dangerous it is for people that have literally some knowledge, but not enough to be absolutely spot on. So somehow or another, what was it that got particularly loose? It was one of the lower arm bolts was a little bit loose.
Yeah, it was
Not
a pinch bolt that, I mean, another word for pinch is, I suppose, just squeeze it. It was just nipped up, wasn't it? But I think the idea of a pinch bolt is it should be called a bloody hard squeeze bolt rather than a pinch bolt, shouldn't it?
Well, the lower arm could never have moved out because it's designed to go through a little cutout, so you would have stopped it from going anywhere. So that's fine. There's a little bit of play there, and just a little bit of play in the track rod end, which I think somebody must have shaken itself a bit loose. But nevertheless, That is now fine and not at all terrifying, which is great because it certainly was. But nevertheless, it's all good, it's all fine, and of course we're out and about on the road. But the state of the roads at the moment are probably not conducive to low or slightly stiffer classic cars. But on the plus side, in a Mini, you can sort of drive round most of the road, can't you?
Yeah. I mean, you can glance around them and dart around.
That is what I do find with the Caterham, albeit it's the wider bodied version. It is still so narrow that you can drive along pretty much, you can pick your own racing line and stay in your lane.
The good thing about the Mini is it's so small that you can actually swerve around the road but stay within your side of the road, which is quite handy.
It's certainly trickier to avoid potholes if you're in the day car, which is a honking great electric SUV, but it's got slightly squidgier tyres on it, so it's probably okay. But if you're running 10-inch wheels, how tall are the tyres on that? Because I suppose they can't be that wide, so is it going to be something like a 100 width and a 500% profile or something?
Yeah, I think they're a 165/70 tyre, so they're a balloon enough tyre, so they're not too small.
We were following the other day, albeit briefly, one of those ridiculous Lamborghini SUVs, and that was down a country road. Yeah, if you want to call it such a thing, by all means do. I thought it was just pointless, but there you go. But this clown, who clearly had got more money than sense, was just tearing down this country road, disappeared into the distance, sort of hopping from one pothole to another. Well, clearly he could afford to indulge his idiocy and get it all fixed afterwards, though. What you would have to spend on rejigging the suspension on a Lamborghini, God knows what that would cost.
Lots and lots of pounds.
There's an old story that a friend of mine liked to share, and he was parking a car, and there was a lady in a Range Rover who was trying to get into this space in a car park, and it was a bit tricky, and she'd had a few shunts at it, and some idiot just pulled round the corner, drove into the space, and got, well, there you go, love, that's what you can do when you can park, or some words to that effect, something really condescending. And so she just drove the Range Rover up his car onto the bonnet, went, and that's what you can do when you can afford it. And that was the So I suspect probably there was an element of that. I thought that, what a retort. Just completely, just no, I'm not going to have that. Straight up onto the bonnet.
I'll just point out you could do that in a Volvo estate if you wanted, but you would push the car, you would go through the car and push the car out of the space. That would be the way to do it, I think. But I think that's a Mr. Bean sketch as well, isn't it? In his classic Mini, he pushes a car out of a space.
I did do that in my Volvo because someone in a Chrysler Voyager with a tow bar on the back of it had parked their car in the front end of my Volvo, and I was most upset about it. It was very irritating, and they hadn't left me enough space to get out, so I did just pop it into gear and just give it a gentle nudge out and send it on its way so that they could find it later on.
You can't live in a city without contact parking. You always have to move vehicles out of your way slightly. That is the other advantage of Volvo.
This was more like goods yard shunting. But we did get it out of the way. And to be fair, having something with that sort of power is useful. And some years ago, I used to do cars for the Jaguar Land Rover Breakdown, which was busy. And someone did park I think it was a Chevrolet Spark over the driveway, which was really irritating because I used to carry one of these solid tow bar jobbies and just whacked the towing bar, should I say, onto the front of the Chevrolet and just towed it down the road as it was complete and then parked it quite some distance away. Jim will know where this is because this was the road that you used to live on. And I'd left it down the other end of the road by the time I'd come to a rest with it. So it was quite some distance away from where it originally started. When the person came back and said, have you seen my car? I said, yes, I put it down the other end.
That's the way to do it. We've obviously got a good amount of experience on Minis as a personal love affair, but do you do, all makes and model service? I mean, everything from a classic Mini to a Vauxhall, apparently.
I certainly do, yeah. I mean, I do a lot of Land Rovers. I always say that if I was a Toyota mechanic, I wouldn't be very busy. Hence why I chose the Land Rover route.
Wise man indeed, a wise man indeed. But do you find yourself working on much newer stuff? I mean, obviously we rabbit on ad infinitum about the move to electrification on this podcast. Do you? I mean, the nuts and bolts and the mechanical shock absorbers, discs, pads, tyres on an EV are pretty much identical, aren't they? But do you get involved in other bits on electric vehicles yet, or are they all still a bit too new and a bit under manufacturer's warranty for you to have to worry about?
The further I can stay away from playing with the electric, or shall I say, Scale Electrics cars, the better. Give me carbs and points and condensers.
Are they not just overgrown Tamiya radio controlled cars minus the radio control bit? So actually, it's a battery and an electric motor, isn't it? So they're actually
exactly that.
Fairly simple.
They are.
Do you think you'll be able to see out your career? I mean, you're a younger chap. Do you think you'll be able to see out your career without really ever having to get involved, or can you see a time coming where you're going to have to don the big rubber gloves and the wellies and sort of bite the bullet and get on with it?
And the wooden handle to pull the bodies off.
The big hook. Yeah, exactly.
That's it.
Yeah.
No, yeah. As much as I can stay away from the electric stuff, I will do. I don't think there's going to be ever that time where, it's either that or nothing, going that route. I think there's going to be enough of, like the cars are today, as well as the classics and historic cars on the road. They're always going to be around, and I think there's always going to be a need for keeping them on the road. So I feel, let the people that want to go that route with the EV stuff go that way. But I'll certainly be staying behind as such with the older stuff.
Just out of interest, though, is there some sort of CPD upgrade for mechanics who do want to go into EVs? Is there a recognised route within the industry?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, there is certainly all the training courses, etc. But it's the cost of it at the moment. I mean, there's a garage that I know that's local to me that does a lot of the London taxis, where for him to basically become the London taxis has gone that EV route. For him to basically become certified and be able to work on them, it cost him in the region of £100,000 for obviously the training for his mechanics, as well as the equipment and everything else that he needed in the workshop. So when you look at it like that, it's not viable for a lot of garages to go that route unless you are solely using that sort of stuff.
It's a major investment, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's interesting is that from the perspective of sort of working in the industry and sort of dealerships and main dealers and manufacturer workshops effectively, or manufacturer named workshops over the top of the door, is regardless of the fact that you own the garage, you run the franchise, you are, whether you like it or not, signed up to having to buy the various different tools and having to do the training.
Yeah.
And there are, as we were saying, with regards to the qualification, there are different levels of EV qualification. So many manufacturers will say that if you're working on a car that has some high voltage systems, if you're changing the sun blind, so nothing to do with it, you still need to have a base level of EV qualification. Then you'll have another level where you can drop a battery down, and then another level where you can strip the components apart and you can work on the high voltage systems with the lid off, basically. And that's the part where it then starts getting a bit spicy. And if you've got 480 volts, you don't want to be at a point where you have to lick your fingers before you touch something to see whether it's live or not, because you will be blown across the room or fried instantly. Those are the bits that are scary. I think the general sort of consensus in the industry at the moment seems to be that it becomes prohibitively expensive, not just for the training, but for the equipment when you're talking about the relevant lifting tables to lower batteries down, and things like array balancers, which for some time people are saying, EVs are going to be written off because the battery's 20 grand or whatever. In truth, most EVs now, you can replace the individual cells, or they're like gel packs. Some of them are like little vape batteries, all different types, but you can effectively replace these individually now in a lot of batteries, and then you have to balance them using a special piece of equipment, which basically allows them all to sit at the same level and charge at the same rate effectively, so you don't then have nasty issues. I think that's pretty much as a simplistic overview. Carl, would you say that's probably fair?
Yeah, no, definitely. But again, even down to that route of the equipment, etc. Each manufacturer is bringing out their own special tools and everything like that.
Yeah.
So even if you go the EV route, you've then got those tools to buy all the time, because Tesla wants their particular tools, and you've then got Land Rover with their things. So
sure.
I mean, I see it in my industry as it is, without going that route as well. So yeah, it becomes very difficult for small garages to be able to keep up with maintaining vehicles.
All this push towards whether it's electrification or even just the quest for reduced CO2 and improved fuel economy and this, that, the other, it's led to more and more complex engines, and the packaging gets tighter and tighter and tighter. I mean, I had the extreme example. I had the 7-in for MOT, and it's like, shall I take the bonnet off so you can see what's what? oh yeah, let's do that, let's edge it, and 4 catches and the entire bonnet's off and you can see everything. So I'll take the nose cone off as well if you want to see under there, because that's only 4 Zeus clips on it, and it's just so easy to see everything, and there's all the room in the world. But we've got a Jaguar Mark II in the workshop as well at the moment, as well as a Supra. But there's all the room in the world. You could almost stand in the engine bay at the same time as the engine and work on it. Yet in anything modern, you everything's so tightly packaged in, you can't get to anything. So is it, what's the balance of, I don't know, an extra 0.2, 0.3, 0.5, even an extra 1 mile per gallon versus, actually a cam belt change used to be £300, now it's £1,500. It's, does a job like a cam belt, is it more complicated on everything these days?
I'd say so, yeah. I mean, even to the point where, going back to, you open the bonnet, everything's there. Whereas nowadays, you open the bonnet, you've then got, a layer of plastic you've got to remove before you can even see, the beginnings of the engine. And like you say, they're cramming them in so much more now. It's becoming more and more difficult.
I mean, you say it's modern things being crammed in. I can say the outlier was many years ago, anything Italian, where the number of times I've got a bit of a history of Italian cars, which I managed to kick when the Alfa 156 chewed its gearbox to pieces, and it's been Skoda ever since then, which was a bit of a shame, but there you go, reality bites. But I do remember the couple of occasions sort of being at the side of a road with a snapped alternator belt, or the whatever belt it was driving the something. It was belts. It was always belts, and it was almost certainly probably just the fan belt or the alternator belt, because there wasn't much more to driving these things. But I had 3 Uno turbos on the trot, and each one of them had the RAC out. And every time they turned out, you could see their faces drop, because they just don't, the body go, why do they cram so much crap in here? And they'd just be cursing as they trying to get at the alternator underneath the car. So, I mean, the Italians were ahead of the game there, I think. That's the conclusion I would draw. But it is true, isn't it? I mean, there's so much now, it's made almost impregnable, almost by design, so that you can charge a fortune every time you have to service the thing, perhaps. Perhaps I'm being a bit cynical.
I think you're quite right, Carl. You're reckoning almost any job these days under the bonnet, you're going to spend the first hour just stripping enough plastic out of the way so you can see what the problem is.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a business model in itself.
However, if you are going to look for the most reliable thing out there, we will have our assumptions to what I guess we think it's likely to be, probably Toyota. But what would you say is a good solid car these days? If you just want something as your daily, and you want something that is going to always start in the morning, always get you to the shops and back, or the kids to school, whatever it is, the dependable family dog of a car, what would you go for?
Are we talking sort of modern day cars as such, or what you can buy currently?
I would say within the last, let's say within the last 10 years. I think probably cars in the last 10 years covers most people for most dailies, I reckon.
I'd have to say hands down, Kia or Hyundai.
Interesting.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
They are. They used to certainly be the underdogs. That they weren't good-looking cars at all, but they knew how to basically please the crowd with the warranties, etc. And generally speaking, Kias and Hyundais, they are pretty bomb-proof cars. You can't really go wrong with them. They've got all the gadgets on them. I mean, you look at, say, for instance, a Kia Sportage versus a VW.
Do I have
Tiguan
to
or
look
something?
at a Kia Sportage or could I just sort of consider it?
But yeah, what you can get for a fully spec Sportage for the money, you're paying the same money for a bog standard, cloth interioured Tiguan.
Mm-hmm. So generally a bit of a bargain, but also still worth it for the reliability. Because this was always the question, I think. Because when my first car was a Kia, and if you've been watching the YouTube, then you might have seen me trying to achieve 100 miles an hour on a high-speed bowl at Millbrook in a Kia Picanto. But my thoughts
we didn't quite manage it, did we? You even tried a downhill bit. It's like, right, go as high in the lane as you can and then try and point it downhill. That still didn't work, did it?
No, so
were you not ducking behind the steering wheel?
Oh, we did that. No, do we fold the mirrors in?
Yes, tried everything to try and get it up to speed, but even employing sort of an airplane technique of getting that altitude and then dropping down wasn't quite quite enough just to get us up to speed. And when finally we got to 99, you'd then be facing into the wind, going round the circle, and unfortunately at that point,
then I think we realised the tyres were rated to about 70 miles an hour and probably 20 years old as well, weren't they? But it was fine.
Yeah, indeed. Don't try this at home, or indeed, if you don't try this in your high-speed bowl, if you've got one of those at home. But anyway,
if you happen to have a high-speed bowl at home, then probably, do try it, because that's why you have a high-speed bowl at home, isn't it?
And if you have, can we all come and play there, please?
I was going to say, write into us at UKMotorTalk Towers. If you have a high-speed bowl at your home address, can we come and play for the afternoon?
Mark your envelope, I own the Nardo. That'll make it easier to sift through all the thousands of letters we get through the post. I was just going to ask, actually, Carl, if somebody was to bring you a car tomorrow for you and you were just having a day where you just thought, I just want ease of life today, I just want an easy day, what would be the easiest car that someone could bring you? So again, 10 years, not an Astra. I mean, obviously, we're putting them to one side. But I mean, so the 10-year caveat, again, Mike's 10-year thing, of any car within the last 10 years, and I've said 10 a lot, what would be your ideal thing to sort of get it in on, done and finished by lunchtime?
God, that's a tough one.
Basically, what's the simplest thing, the least amount of plastic you've got to remove to get at the engine, if nothing else?
I'd have to then go, off the top of my head, I'd have to say a Nissan NV200.
Is that the van thing?
Yeah, the little vans.
Okay. I know what you mean now. Yeah.
They are simple. They don't go wrong. It's general, suspension, lower arms, drop links. Other than that, they're basic. They're simple.
See, this one day could be the replacement for your bongo, Graham. You never know. one day. It seems like a similar sort of thing, really.
My bongo man is arriving on Friday to try and solve the bloody problems with the diesel.
The last couple of questions to Carl, but Carl's of the last 10 years or so. Actually, 10 years, I don't think is that old for a car these days, is it? I mean, it's certainly not uncommon to see. I mean, we've said in our WhatsApp group every now and again to say, you don't see many old style number plates, whatever they call them, prefix style number plates, and then all of a sudden, they're all out again. I was parked in Tesco car park, and the only 4 cars I could see were all on prefix style plates. But actually, is the average age of vehicle got a lot older for you, Kyle?
Yeah, I mean, I don't look at a car, say 2005 car. I don't look at that as an old car, but when you look at it, you realise how actually, how old it is. You're talking sort of, 19, 20 years old. But to me, it doesn't feel like an old car. I'm very much, I want to keep the older stuff on the road, because the older stuff is certainly going to outlast the new stuff. Say, for instance, my Mini. What would you buy, a modern day Mini, for instance? That's not going to ever last 40, 50 years. You're never going to see them after 20, I don't think. But let alone, the sort of stuff kicking around.
Borrowed time now.
Definitely borrowed
mine's,
time.
What, 21 and a half? I think probably something like that.
21 and a half, your Mini.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't seem that old. My Caterham is, I know it's a slightly different design, and that hasn't really changed for a long time. And you put a private plate on it and nobody can tell the age, but that's 16 years old. It certainly doesn't feel like it. But I remember when I passed my test at college, and it was about 2000-ish, 99, 2000, I was driving around in an E-Reg Mark II Golf, so that was a 1988, so it was 11 or 12 years old at the time, and it seemed like quite an old car compared to some others, and the general way of things and how much cars had moved on between the late 80s and the 2000s. But now it just seems that that age of car, if you had a 12-year-old car as your first car, well, that's a vaguely modern shape Focus that actually is not that long being facelifted, and it looks kind of like the current one, and it's just a different perspective, isn't it? But I find it hard to believe your Mini is that old, because it doesn't look it. It's partly because of how well you've kept it and looked after it and whatever else, but even just in terms of design and things like that, is it maybe because it hasn't got the sat nav in the middle? And I find the one thing that dates a car at the moment is the infotainment. If you've got a 2010 pardon me, Nissan Qashqai. Sorry, I can't say it. A Nissan Qashqai. The infotainment bit in the middle really, really dates how old the rest of the car is. Actually, you take that bit of tech out of it, and the rest of it isn't that old. It's hideous, but it doesn't seem that old. So maybe the sweet spot is that early 2000s, mid 2000s car when SatNav was a £1,200 option, so nobody had it. Is that the sweet spot?
Definitely. I'm a real pervert for the sort of year 2000 to 2007, that era where we've master electronic ignition, we've got air conditioning in cars, and we've got mechanical proper power steering as opposed to the later electric stuff. We've got just the basic bits you need.
You could turn the ESP off really, really easily with the press of one button.
Auto lights, auto wipers, and that's about it really. And beyond that, what do you really need? Most of them you could change the head unit over in, and that then means it's future proof.
These things are very age related, though. I mean, that for you is a sort of golden era. I'm a bit older than you are, and my golden era is probably 60s, perhaps, or 70s, because those were the cars that were around when I was a kid. And I saw, I think yesterday, Sunbeam Rapier, which was about 61. Absolute gem. I'd love to own something like that.
I don't really want to have to get out on a Sunday morning and grease my nipples before I can go somewhere for the rest of the week, or be certain. I want to be certain it's going to start. So that era, cars were advanced enough that they were. We'd moved away really from things like points and all that kind of stuff, and we've moved into just everyday electronic ignition. Just you jump in the car, start it, and away you go. And the other day we had a chap come in who was looking to trade in a 2002 Ford Focus, and I got disproportionately excited about this because a Mark I Ford Focus for me is probably the best car. Ignore fastest, best, whatever. I think the best overall car that Ford ever made, and I think that era, they're still on the road now. If they've been relatively well looked after, mostly looked after, kind of looked after, then generally speaking, they're probably still on the road, and they'll still be okay, and they'll still be rewarding to drive, and they'll still be relatively comfortable. They're just a great car. And for a standard 1.6 litre hatchback, I say I got really too disproportionately excited about it.
So speaking of keeping old things going, Graham, what have you been doing?
Mean.
We had a very interesting day out, courtesy of the Rolls-Royce Enthusiast Club. Just, you can see the film. Have a look on our website. It's a wonderful piece of film. Some fabulous cars on there. No price tags.
We only produce top quality stuff, you see.
Exactly so. As in the production of some of those Rolls Royces.
If you want to see that, you can check that out on YouTube. We are at UKMotorTalk. And you can also see my comedy efforts inside my garage on my Not a Rolls Royce. And that, I think, probably draws us to a close. I'd like to say at this point, thank you to Carl. And of course, I think at this point, we should let you plug your business. So please do.
No, thanks for having me. My company's called MotionWorks, based in Aldershot. So anything you need, just give me a shout.
How do you spell MotionWorks?
So it's motion, and then the works is the German spelling, so WERKS.
Excellent.
And any particular flavour of car? Can we bring you something from the 50s? Can we bring you something from yesterday? What's the sort of range?
You can bring me anything you like. Generally, as long as it's not French. Or a Mazda Bongo.
Wise
or
man.
Battery powered.
Wise man, well swerved. And on that note, we really must go. I've been Mike. Goodbye.
I've been Jim. Goodbye and take care.
I've been Graham, penniless as ever.
I've been Dave, and I'll leave the last goodbye to our friend over in Aldershot.
And I've been Kyle. Thank you very much.
And thank you for listening. Goodbye.
UKMotorTalk, a First Take Media production.